Good afternoon. It's Roger Leonard. I've been doing Skype classes for the Jamaica School of Preaching on Wednesdays from 2:30 to 4:30 with a break in between for church leadership and administration. I had a Skype call going. Somehow that got dropped. And I'm recording this for two purposes. One is so that the students from the school will still get their lesson, and for anyone else that wants to join in on sharing this with me today. I enjoy teaching these men. We have students they're in Kingston, Jamaica, and we're learning about leadership. The lesson we're on at this particular hour for Jamaica School of Preaching is becoming motivators. These lessons I've been using lately are generated from a study guide by Brother J.J. Turner called Christian Leadership Handbook, How to Be Worth Following. And I edit these lessons to some degree. I give Brother Turner credit for the material of his that I use, but I edit this for my purposes. And I'm thinking about motivation as leaders in the church. If you're an elder, if you're a preacher, if you're a deacon, if you're a Bible class teacher, if you are a member of the church, regardless of your role, but especially those in leadership positions, we want to do a good job at motivating people. And we start with maybe a little bit of an old-fashioned illustration, but I think anybody that's ever been around horses or farms will understand it, that these two young boys were trying to pull this horse to the feeding trough to get him to eat. And the father was watching the boys and said, boys, what are you doing? They said, well, we're trying to get Rusty to eat. And the dad, having had so much more experience with horses, took a little feed in his hand and he put it up to the horse's mouth and gave him a little bit, and then just kind of moved along and then got him to the feeding trough. And the illustration is the horse was motivated to eat. We do that with babies, a little food at a time, try to get them to eat all of their food if possible, or most of it. But when we're dealing with people, we want to motivate people. The church is a working institution. It's not for an audience to observe. In the church, we're supposed to be serving the Lord. One of the things that I've noticed, and many others have noticed over the years, that quite often about 10 or 15% of membership will do maybe 85 or 90% of the work, and which means very little is done by others. Let me ask you a question, and this is for me too, as a leader. What percentage of the work am I involving myself in? Do I sit around and let everybody else do the work, or do I involve myself in the work? The Lord's church is a working institution, and I myself need to be involved in serving and working for the Lord, and not just be an observer. And so you think about why is it that you see men who step up to be elders, they're always working, they work hard. And then you maybe look at some of your deacons. Some of your deacons work hard, but some deacons may not do much. You know, the word deacon means servant. And so it's kind of inconsistent to be called a servant and not be wanting to serve. But we studied in the last lesson a few minutes ago from Ephesians 4 that every member of the body, according to verse 16, is to do their share so that the church will grow. And as leaders, we want to motivate people to be active in the kingdom. And I don't know a whole lot about horses, but I understood that illustration. to give him a little bit, kind of an incentive to go to the feeding trough. And but I want to look at some personal factors that we can consider in people's performance or their work in the kingdom. And this, if any of you who are listening happen to have a copy of J.J. Turner's book, The Christian Leadership Handbook, it came out in 89, I don't know the date, something like that, in the 90s. And How to Be Worth Following. Christian Leadership Handbook by J.J. Turner, How to Be Worth Following. Has a lot of good lessons in it. And this is from lesson number 16. And I changed the title for my purposes from motivation to becoming motivators. How do we motivate our children? How do we motivate others in the kingdom? How do we even motivate ourselves? And some of the things that are listed in this lesson, the first one, as far as getting individuals to accept and perform in their assignments, number one is understanding the assignment. When Jesus trained the apostles, he helped them to understand what they were supposed to be doing. He demonstrated it. He talked about it. He talked about it and he demonstrated it to help them know what their purpose was. And he showed them. He says, if you'll follow me, I'll make you these fishermen. I'll make you fishers of men. Teach you how to catch men. But so they had to understand the work. And they learned an awful lot following Jesus. But secondly, is not only to understand the work, but have the ability to do it. We studied in the last lesson the idea of all church members not having the same ability. We're all different. We have different ways of approaching things. We have different talents, and we have different personalities. We're all different. And there are some people that should not be doing some things because they're better at doing others. That's the way it works in the world, in the workforce. I mean, you go into a plant. Some people make good plant managers. Some people don't want to be manager. They'd rather run a piece of equipment or maybe be over a few people and not be over an entire plant. And then there are those they want to be responsible, and they're good at managing people, but the ability to do the work. Well, our job as leaders is to help people analyze and see if they have the ability to do certain things, but also help them develop in those ways. There's some things that some people will never be able to do, but there's some things people could do with a little encouragement and use work and learn how to do that. Thirdly is their spirituality. Paul wrote to the church in Colossae in Colossians chapter 3 about seeking those things that are above and not the things that are on the earth. Some people's spiritual level is seeking spiritual matters, seeking things above. Some people are still looking at things on the earth. Where are people spiritually? And if they're thinking in a spiritual way, getting that person to be involved in the work of the church is far easier. If they're focused on physical things or things on this earth, they're not going to do very much serving in the kingdom because they're not kingdom oriented. One of our jobs as leaders is to help people become spiritually oriented. Focus on things that are spiritual in nature, not just things that are on the earth. And number 4 is a willingness. I was talking with a friend of mine recently about the qualifications of elders. And we were talking about the desire to be an elder. In 1 Timothy 3, if any man desires the office of a bishop, he desires a good work. And in talking with this particular brother, we were discussing how that he had kind of in the past let people off the hook because they did not desire the office. We got to thinking about it. Desire is not a qualification, but in a sense, it's something that can be cultivated. Think about this, the desire. We as leaders should help people have a desire to serve God. Example, God goes to Moses in Exodus 4. Hey, Moses, I want you to go set my people free in Egypt. And Moses has all these excuses. There he is in the presence of deity at a burning bush. Take your shoes off, Moses. The place where you're standing is holy ground. And he starts talking to him. I want you to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And if you go read it, you'll find that Moses argued with the Lord. But, in other words, he didn't have the desire. Did the Lord let him off the hook? No, he didn't. He talked to him and said, look, what's in your hand? He had a staff. Throw it on the ground. It became a serpent. Pick it up again. And it became a staff again. Put your hand in your tunic there and then pull it out and it's leprous. And he put it back and it's healed. Takes it out again and it's healed. And then he says, I'll be with you. What's God doing? He is developing a sense of personal desire and ability. We have to do that with people. Go to John chapter 21. Jesus is talking to Peter. What did Peter do? He denied the Lord 3 times. 3 times. He told him he would. Before the cock crows, you're going to do it, Peter. Sure enough, he did. And that 3rd time, Peter heard that cock crow, and Jesus looked at him, and he looked at Jesus, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. After the resurrection, this is while Jesus was on trial, but then after the resurrection, Jesus had a conversation with Peter. Peter, do you love me? Hey, you know I love you, Lord. Well, feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Finally, he did it 3 times, interestingly. Cock crowed 3 times. He denied 3 times. He denied 3 times. And Jesus asked him the question 3 times. Feed my sheep. I don't believe Peter felt worthy at that point of becoming, he's talking about him becoming an elder. And you read in 1 Peter 5, he became an elder in the Lord's church. He was a fellow elder, shepherd, pastor. I want you to do this, Peter. Peter didn't feel worthy, probably. I want you to do it anyway. Feed my sheep. Tend my lambs. Take care of my people, Peter. Sometimes desire has to be cultivated. As leaders, be like Jesus. Be like God to a degree. What about Jonah? Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh. I want you to go and you go tell those people what I tell you. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. Jonah didn't want to go. He goes down to Tarshish and gets on a ship, tries to get away from God. Storm comes up. Jonah knew. God caused a storm. Told the mariners, throw me overboard. They did. The storm stopped. Great fish swallowed Jonah. Spat him out later on the beach. Jonah, go tell these people what I told you to do. Jonah didn't want to go. God created a desire in him. Sometimes we have to work as leaders to create a desire in people. God has his ways. Certainly in his ways, his way with Jonah was miraculous. We don't have that ability. But the 4th point here is a person's performance comes eventually from an inner motivation. If I can learn anything about that, I can learn it from Jesus, from Philippians 4 where Jesus comes to earth to be a servant and even to the point of death. Why? He wanted to come. When the Apostle Paul, having been Saul of Tarsus, persecuted Christians, once he understood that Jesus was the Son of God, Christianity was the way, the truth, and the life through Christ, he had an inner desire, not just because Jesus sent him, but he had an inner desire to share the gospel with other people. At some point, motivation must come from within us as individuals. And so we need to remember that as leaders, whether it's we're talking about ourselves or other people, eventually people will motivate themselves. Even though they may need encouragement, be prodding a little bit. Look, Moses, go down there to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Moses didn't want to go. Send somebody else. Don't you have somebody? No, I want you to go. So he went. Was he successful? Yes. Why? Because he did what God told him to. God was not sending Moses down there to do things his way, and he doesn't do that with us today. We do things God's way. It's really not about us, but we have to be motivated. We are co-workers or fellow workers with God. And so we get motivated to do it. And so maybe also another way we can do this, you take Paul and Timothy, Acts 16. Paul gets Timothy to go with him, to take Timothy, to mold him and shape him into an evangelist. Paul knew eventually he would leave this earth one way or another. He knew that Timothy was younger. Unless something happened to him, he'd still be here. Somebody needed to carry on the work. Paul had to work with Timothy. He even talked about him in 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, that God's not given us a spirit of fear, but a love, power, and a sound mind. Timothy, you can't be afraid, son. Motivation. Get rid of the fear. Motivating other people. But to manipulate. Brother Turner uses manipulate in the lesson, but he uses it in a positive way. It's not trying to trick people, but to get people to work. Jesus would do that by teaching, for example, in John 4, we looked at the woman in our last lesson. At the end of it, let me tell you fellas something. You see all these people out here listening to me? The harvest, the fields are wide in the harvest. There are people that want to hear, fellas, but the laborers are few. He's trying to, and he says, pray the Lord of harvest, send forth laborers. Send forth laborers. Let me ask you a question. If you pray that prayer, would you not include yourself in being one of those laborers? Or are you just praying for somebody else? Well, I would pray for myself to be one of those people. And so let's look at some factors. Factors of motivation. Motivation is based on needs that we all have. There are things that motivate us that are called our needs. Back in 1943, Abraham Maslow developed what he called the hierarchy of human needs. And it was done in a paper, a psychology paper, and it was called A Theory of Human Motivation. If you've ever seen that triangle, that pyramid rather, you look at man's basic needs that every human has. Every human has these basic needs. There are, at the bottom, our physiological needs. Food, water, warmth, rest. These are things that we need to survive. You cannot survive without food, water, and warmth, or in some places being cooler, and resting. You got to have sleep sometimes. These are basic needs. And then there are safety needs included in the basic needs of security, feeling safe. And then he moves from physical needs to psychological needs, like a sense of belongingness. I do not believe that a lot of the people who seclude themselves from others do not want friends at all. I don't believe that. I believe a lot of people are shy. Maybe they don't want a lot of friends, and maybe they have a hard time talking to people. But everybody needs some kind of most people, unless there's something really wrong with that person, they have a belongingness need. I want you to start thinking about these things. As Christians, Jesus addressed our physiological needs in Matthew 6. You seek the kingdom first, you'll have them. Jesus promised to take care of our souls. Now, we might get killed for being Christians, but do not fear those who can kill the body, but rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. But at the same time, God wants us in heaven. And then the sense of belonging. One of the reasons that I really love being a member of the Lord's church is people make me feel like part of it. People make me feel like part of it. And I want to make other people feel like they're part of it, that they're important. And then another psychological need is some measure of self-esteem, some measure of feeling good about yourself. This is not self-exaltation, but feeling a sense of self-worth. And then the self-actualization or self-fulfillment, that is achieving one's potential. Now, in this lesson that Brother Turner gave us, he didn't give us that pyramid, but he did use that as thinking about people's physiological needs. You know, one of the things the church does for people is help them when they need financial help. We seek to give people a place of safety and security and help them accomplish something. And now we're talking about leaders as motivators. How do we motivate people to accomplish something? Well, you give them a goal, something to work toward. We talked a little earlier about helping people find their talent or their ability, and then you help that person meet goals that they can achieve. We should never try as leaders to get people to accomplish things they cannot achieve, or if they can achieve it, they have to do it step by step. But we've all had to do that to get where we need to be. And then the need for, and going back to Maslow's pyramid, the need for intimate relationships and personal interaction. And we studied in our first lesson several texts on one another. Love one another. Encourage one another. Admonish one another. And recognize one another. Greet one another. There are these interactions. I read a piece recently by a young woman who was not a member of the church, and she had visited a church, and she didn't feel comfortable. She looked at her life, what she had done, and she did not feel comfortable because of things she had done. She didn't feel like that's the place she needed to be. But she kept going, and the people interacted with her. They talked to her. They asked her questions. They let her know they were glad she was there. And so while she wrestled, even at first with that, what's wrong with these people? People don't do that. But she began to realize that it was genuine, that it was not, that it was real. These people really cared about her. So she kept going, and she would sing, and in other words, and finally she was baptized into Christ for remission of her sins. Why? Because people gave her personal attention. They personally interacted with her. As leaders in the church, we have to try to personally interact with people. Not just preachers, not just elders, not just deacons, everybody. But as leaders in the church, we set the example, we set the precedent, and other people follow us. And it may take years for someone to observe the way you interact with others. Jesus did it, and we can do it. And eventually they say, you know, I think I can do what he's doing. I remember back in the 80s when I first was restored to the Lord, people in the East Ridge Church in Chattanooga, women, older women, some of them old enough maybe to be my mother, but a little older anyway, and they interacted with me. And I detected that they really cared. about me. And that was powerful. And so as men, we can do that. Women can do that. You don't have, women can't preach. Of course not publicly, but you can interact with people. And then recognizing people's needs. Some people like attention. And sometimes we give those people a hard way to go. Well, what's wrong with giving them a little attention if it helps them be stronger Christians? One of the reasons that I try to tell jokes is I may be wanting a little attention. Just telling you the truth. And sometimes people do things. What's wrong with somebody wanting attention? Don't you want a little attention from people? Sure you do. So let's be loving enough to give them some attention. I've learned this. If our children are not given attention from Christian parents on spiritual matters, they will find that attention somewhere else, and it's probably not going to be the right place. It's no different sometimes with adults. They may find that attention in the wrong places with the wrong people. As leaders, try to help people, give them a little attention, help them find their independence and their status and a little recognition. We're not talking, again, like we said earlier, about false, flattery, but helping them feel wanted and giving people a sense of self-worth. There's a difference in people putting themselves on a pedestal or thinking more, as the Bible says, thinking more highly of themselves than they ought to think, and giving people a sense of self-worth. I've wondered, as we looked earlier in that example of that woman in Luke chapter 8 who had come to Simon's house and was weeping and washing Jesus' feet with her tears and drying his feet with the hair of her head. Was she trying to show that she had a little worth? The Bible doesn't say how she felt, but she could have been saying, I'm so glad Jesus helped me, and I can do a little something for him. And the way he treated her would obviously make her feel good. Some people have a very low sense of self-worth. They don't feel good about themselves. And maybe they have reason to, the way they were treated, the way they were raised. I'm very fortunate the way I was raised, but not everybody's had a good upbringing. And so help them feel worthy. Every single human was made in the image and the likeness of God. That's Genesis 1:26 and 27. That means they are worth something. Jesus died for every single person. Don't ever think you're not worth something. But as leaders, we have to help people see they're worth something to God. Made in his image. His son gave his life, shed his blood, so they could have the opportunity to go to heaven. I think that says people are worth something. And then the sense of love, real love. I had someone recently tell me they don't trust preachers. I understand that. I know some preachers, they can't be trusted. Most people can't be trusted. We're going to be frank about it. And I don't put myself on any kind of a pedestal. I try to be real, genuine. And if I'm not going to be real, I need to quit what I'm doing and just not even claim to be a Christian, much less a preacher. But show genuine love for people. Jesus loved. If you go read John chapter 13, he loved them to the end or to the uttermost, which meant Jesus did what was best. But they knew he cared. And as leaders in the church, people need to know, and we have to communicate, that we care about people. Maybe we're not good at it. Maybe that's something we need to work on. But how do you motivate people if they don't think you really love them. Well, you don't. We're probably better sometimes at pushing people away than we are at drawing. So let's look at some ways that we, as those in the church who are leaders, especially elders who are shepherds of the flock, who have a responsibility to be right under Jesus. If you read 1 Peter 5, you've got Jesus, the chief shepherd, and then right down here you got the elders right under him. And he says you need to shepherd those among yourselves. In other words, the elders' jobs are to shepherd their own flock. Not everywhere, but right there. And that's a full-time job. So how do we get greater work participation in the church as leaders to help people? So what are some ways? Number one, I want to use the word empower. Empower. Permit the church members to help formulate. I'm talking about everybody. Sure, you use your other elders and your deacons and your preacher, but others involve the church in helping formulate plans and goals for various areas of the local work. Especially elders, empower your deacons. Don't take their jobs away from them. Do your job as a shepherd. Let the deacons do their job as ministers, as servants, and empower them. And don't try to micromanage everything they do. Empower them to formulate plans. And so that when they do that, then they get involved in trying to get the members involved. And that empowers members to serve and help the church to grow. Secondly, empower. Second one is delegate. Maybe I could reverse this and say delegate, then empower. But delegate, that is to give reasonable responsibilities and authority for carrying out the work. Delegate, empower, delegate, or delegate, then empower. Let them do it. Let them do their jobs. It's all right to ask how things are going. It's all right to check up on, to see how things are going. But it's not okay to give a man a work and then try to not let him do it. That's how we all grow. Thirdly, recognize. First one, I'm going to change this. Delegate, empower, recognize. What does that mean? Give recognition for accomplishments. Tell people when they did a good job. You know, in Matthew chapter 25, when Jesus talked about the parable of the talents, what's he going to say on the day of judgment to those who have done what he asked them to do? Well done, you good and faithful servant. There are times when we as leaders need to tell people, well done, good job. And it's amazing how powerful that is to motivate. You know, you tell somebody you're doing a good job, typically they're going to want to do better. They're going to want to improve. The fourth word is petition. Ask people for ideas and opinions about things, about, well, what can we do to improve in this area, or what have we left out that might need some attention. As leaders, we have a big job, especially elders and deacons. You know, don't just sit around with your name on the bulletin. Help people. Ask people, do you have some ideas how I might do a better job as a deacon? And hopefully the elders have given you a responsibility and not just a title, but a way to serve. And then you begin to, the fifth word is, let me start over. Delegate, empower, recognize, petition, organize. Take all the things that you've been talking about and doing and start putting them into action groups. Committees, like it or not, are powerful. And put people in committees who, okay, they're good at this, they're good at that. And help them find, okay, some people are good at artwork. Some people are better at fixing things. Some people are better at just encouraging. I mean, people have different ways, but get people together for action and working together. And that goes back to Ephesians 4:16, that every part does its share, but we still work together. The body works as a unit. The hand's not out here all by itself working. It's working in conjunction with the body. And every member is the same way. And so I want to think about then establishing those who are leaders as accepting the role as motivators. And then you ask yourself the question, am I good at motivating people? And somebody says, well, maybe I am and maybe I'm not. Okay, where are you weak in that area? Are you trying to motivate people? Are you just letting other elders work, or other deacons work, or other church members work? Letting the preacher do all the work, or the preacher not doing anything, let everybody else do it? I mean, are we good at motivating? When you think about how we motivate people, I heard this joke some years ago, and maybe it will translate and apply. Trying to get somebody to feel valuable and useful. Preacher said, you can call a man a dog if you know how. Of course, immediately when he said that, he had my attention. He said, you go to some fella and say, hey, I hear you're the top dog around here. Well, that's not a put down, but it's like, okay, that means there's value in his position. And we help people find value in their position, but teach people values. Motivation, to motivate people, is to instill within them certain values. Do you know what Jesus instilled in his disciples to value? People. That's what Jesus instilled his disciples to value. But at the same time, he helped them to realize, hey, there's such thing as truth. You can know it, and it'll make you free, John 8:32. There's a such thing as justice. In Isaiah 42, we learn that it's a prophecy about Jesus, that he will establish justice on the earth, and that's a fairness that he teaches us, to be honest, to be truthful. And Jesus wanted his disciples to be loyal, motivate people to know and be truthful, to be honest, to be loyal. Find that inner beauty that a Christian should have, like we read when Peter in 1 Peter chapter 3 talks about the inner beauty of this woman who is trying to win her husband without preaching to him all the time, but living the Christian life. And then this need and ability to grow. Let people grow. Back earlier this year, I was at a nursery, and this lady had all kinds of plants, and she had these little lemongrass plants, and they're about like that, and had a sign up there, help fight mosquitoes. I thought, good. I'd like to have 11 of those around the back of my house. We have a lot of mosquitoes, so I bought 2 little plants, and I found out that I probably did need to buy more. But those little plants I can't show you in the screen, but they're tall now. They grew because I worked with them, I watered them, I tried to take care of them. You work with and cultivate and help people, they'll grow, and they'll become more useful and efficiency. And so in this lesson, I have sought to introduce the idea and establish the need for men, especially elders and deacons and preachers, and even Bible class teachers with their young students, to motivate. To motivate is not to push, but to ultimately help people to motivate themselves. If God, through His Word and examples that He gave in the Bible and the teaching of Jesus and the love that Jesus shared and showed, can motivate me to be a better servant. And I can help somebody else for the same reasons I'm doing my job as a motivator. And I promise that if we will put these things into practice, the church will grow. People will be motivated. I have seen people who really didn't do much. You watch them. What are they good at? Are they discouraged? Are they struggling with something in their lives? Because you know the talent is there, but maybe there's something going on and they're struggling with it. And you got to be patient with people, because sometimes their struggles are deep. Peter's was. I will say this, and it'll be the lesson for today, but you know how Peter did. Lord, even if you die, I'm going to die with you. Really? Oh, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times. And then he did. But Jesus worked with Peter. You know, I believe that Peter, in 2 Peter 3:9, where he says that God is long-suffering toward us, not willing that any should perish. I believe Peter learned that from Jesus. He may have learned it from the Old Testament, I'm sure, and he learned it from God. But I know one thing, Jesus was long-suffering with Peter. But ultimately, he made a better man out of him. He motivated him. And he preached the first gospel sermon in Acts 2. He kept preaching throughout the book of Acts. He becomes an elder in the church in Jerusalem because Jesus motivated him to serve. Let's be leader motivators so the kingdom of God can be motivated to grow and go. God bless you all.